Good afternoon, everyone.
Evening all.
Welcome to another episode of To the Grave and Back. Wayne, first off, good to see you back for starters.
It feels good to be back as well after the Christmas break and not being well. It's nice to be getting back in the driving seat and pushing forward again.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. So, just so everyone knows, too, Lois will not be joining us for tonight because she said she too was kind of, even though we've spoken to her, she said she wasn't feeling so good either, right?
Yeah, Lois hasn't been too great, and she's also had an upsetting time with her family. So she's had to sort of take some time back from everything to just sort of get herself better again. So we hope Lois does all right and sort of comes back with everybody else.
She is watching us. So yep, our pleasure, Lois.
Because we love you, Lois, and we want you back.
Oh, Nikola, good to see you.
We can't do it on
our own. Rosie might also hopefully be joining us as well. I just spoke to her through Facebook. I just told her that we just got started, so hopefully she'll make an appearance soon. So, but for now, it's just going to be the two of us. And for today, we're going to be talking about two things. One is we're going to finally finish up my slideshow once and for all that we've had to push back several times. Hello, Rita. And
evening, Rita.
It will be such a relief to finally be done with this slideshow because, like I said, it was a lot of work putting together, but I'm ready to finish this off. So we'll be talking about that. We're going to wrap that up, along with also talking about the main subject for today, which is Nikola Tesla, which I'm going to be learning a lot about this myself because I only know a few things about him. So this will be really fascinating. So hang on one second. I forgot to do this before I came on. But let me get the slide. I mean, I got the document open. I just don't have the slideshow open. So just bear with me for just a second here. I always have these technical issues with PowerPoint sometimes. I hate it when that happens.
So that's the problem when you go to be technical and you sort of make the boo-boo of forgetting to do something. Being technical doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Well, I will say one other thing. At least one good thing, however, is that at least the connection's keeping up. So I didn't have that issue like last week. Oh, my God. Did you watch last week's show? Did you watch the opening of it? It was...
Kept coming and going.
It was bad. Like, not just one issue. It was bad.
Yeah. I think sometimes it gets like that, doesn't it? I mean, we have that here sometimes. When the junction box that they use for the internet has an issue, if it gets too hot, it starts to slow down. And you could be in the middle of doing something, and then all of a sudden it just freezes, and then everybody's private messaging you saying, "You've frozen, come back." And you're like, "There's nothing I can do about it." And in the meantime, in the back, you're turning on and off the router, trying to get things up and running again, and panicking about what you're going to do next. And you just have to wait for it to cool down and work itself out. And eventually it does, but it's just annoying when it causes so much upheaval.
It definitely creates a lot of frustration. And that's actually what I'm kind of concerned about for next week, because it's going to be the opposite over here. Temperatures are supposed to drop like close down to like 4 degrees. So my concern obviously would be the connection when the weather starts dropping like that. That's when you have to put another coin in the meter. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And we've had some bad weather over here recently. We've just had what's left of all the big storms that you guys had managed to make their way over here. And now we've had the freezing temperatures come in as well. And a lot of them are coming in from the east and the north. And for the first time in about a year, we actually had some snow here in Colchester, in Essex, which is on the east coast, southeast. And so we're like, oh, great, we're getting all this weather. And then we had one day where it snowed, and it wasn't enough to even settle properly. And now they're turning around and saying you're going to get more next week. But in the meantime, we're down into -degrees centigrade overnight. And it is horrendous.
Oh my God.
And of course, with the cost of living as it is at the moment, everybody's having to put their heating on to keep warm. And they've just put the prices of the energy up.
Really?
They've raised the cap on the energy prices. So we're now going to have to start paying even more for our energy than we did 3 weeks ago.
Oh my God. That's just ridiculous.
So, of course, now the cold weather's in. You know, everybody's putting the heating on, and we're right back to where we started.
I honestly didn't even think it was going to make its way all across to where you guys are. I never would think that.
They say they had lost their strength, but all they did was bring sort of heavy winds, but it was enough to cause a lot of damage, pushed a lot of trees over, damaged a lot of properties. As far as loss of life is concerned, I don't think many people had actually lost their lives because of the storms. It was more the damage to property that happened, but nowhere near as bad as the hurricane in '87, I think it was.
Right.
That was nasty.
Yeah, oh, I can imagine. Well, you know, this one final thing just before we get started was, I mean, one of those snowstorms that we had, I was a little concerned about because we had it on this most recent Saturday, and I was a little bit concerned for the roads because I was supposed to go up to an investigation up in Wisconsin with my crew. So I was told originally the snow was supposed to end earlier that afternoon, but it never did. But by the time that we finally left, because we must have left, I think around 7 o'clock or so for this investigation. First one of 2024, speaking of which. And surprisingly, the roads were great. We didn't have any issue. But when we were coming back home from Wisconsin, that's when it started coming down. But it still wasn't heavy enough to really like cover the streets. So I don't know how we managed to do it, but getting back up and forth between the border, we managed to get back home in one piece.
It's surprising, isn't it? I mean, I prefer driving at night than I do during the day. And when you add snow to the mix as well, there's something about it when it's snowing at night time and the light is reflecting from your headlights onto the snow as you're driving along, and how pretty it looks.
It was really
dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, driving in them conditions. And I can remember one day, I think I was going to pick my children up from their school. And as I was driving up to the school, we had a big thunderstorm come in. But it was also a snowstorm as well. So we had thunder snow.
Oh, thunder snow. Yes, I've heard of that.
It was amazing because you could see the thunderstorm in the distance. And then all of a sudden, you just see this blanket of white come straight towards us. And it was literally just threw it down with snow, and you could see all the lightning in the background, and it was reflecting off the snow as well.
Oh, really?
It was crazy, but it was really spectacular and beautiful at the same time.
It was when we were on our way back. And also, just to answer Eric, I can't say exactly where. It was at an undisclosed location. It was a residential, so I can't really say exactly where it is. So, but yeah, coming back though, the snow it was incredible. And at one point on our way back, we actually had to stop at an oasis because we were there from like 7 o'clock to like about 11 o'clock that night. And on the way back, I found out that none of us even had any dinner or anything. So we stopped at an oasis, grabbed like McDonald's. And then on the way back, no, not just on the way back. We got out and just admired the snowfall. It was pretty incredible. I should have taken some pictures while we were out there.
I mean, I've done that plenty of times. I used to like going thunderstorm watching, And many years ago, when I was working as a chef in a local hospital, the chef that worked with me, he was ex-army, and he lived on the coast. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, we've got some thunderstorms coming in this afternoon. Do you fancy coming down to the coast with us and watching the storms?" So I said, "Yeah, no problem. I'll come down with you." So we finished work. We saw that the weather pattern had said that the storms were coming in. And as we were driving down there, I was following the storm on a storm tracker. And just as we got to the coast, you see the storm coming up. And my friend was taking photos. And he saw this bolt of lightning had hit a little fishing boat, only a small thing. And it was moored up, but the lightning had hit this fishing boat and it caught fire. So we were quite a distance away, but his camera had quite a good zoom lens on it. So he was taking photos. The fire brigade turned up and started to put the fire out. And it wasn't until 3 days later when he looked over the photos and he came into work and he said, "You know that boat that caught fire down at St. Joseph, where we were?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "Have a look at this." And he showed me the first picture and it was the boat on fire. Second picture, fire brigade had just turned up. Third picture, fire brigade had got the hose pipes out and they were just starting to douse the flames. Then he zoomed in on the front of the boat, and 9 times out of 10 on boats, we've got the serial number at the front of the boat. And he went, "Do you recognise that?" And I went, "No." He said, "Okay, I'll show you another photo." So he shows me another photo of him standing on that boat in the dock.
Oh my gosh.
And I went, "Jeez. Right, it's the same boat." He said, "Yeah, it's my boat." I'm like, "Seriously?" The bolt of lightning, we're standing there going, "Oh my, wow, this is really cool," taking photos, look, getting really excited to watch the fire brigade turn up. And it turned out to be his very own boat that caught fire.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, "You could not make that up." And he just turned around and he's like, "It's a good job it's insured." It was crazy. He was fuming, and I think he said it took about 5 months in the end to get all the insurance sorted out for it and to replace it.
Wow. That is just nuts.
Weird and wonderful weather.
That's the power of Mother Nature right there.
It is exactly, and you wouldn't expect it. You know, you think, wow, you get all these storm chases. They go out, they go looking for tornadoes, and they film the event happening, and you never realise, you know, the situation could get out of hand so quickly and so easily. And in his situation, he saw the boat on fire and took photos of it, thinking of how powerful that lightning was to have caught fire to this boat, not realising it was his own boat.
Jeez.
And it wasn't until afterwards that someone called him and said, "Your boat's got some damage." And then he looked on the photos and discovered it was his boat.
That is just crazy. Unbelievable.
So yeah,
who would have guessed?
I mean, we both laughed about it. I didn't want to laugh to start off with, but he cracked the joke and we both ended up laughing. So
I was going to say, how could you not?
Let's put it this way. Because he was ex-army, he was well built.
Yeah.
Not the sort of person you want to upset. So I purposely waited for him to crack a joke first before I said anything, because then I knew it was safe for me to do so. He turned around and he said, "I won't be catching fish for a while until I get a new boat." I'm like, it's safe for me to crack jokes now.
Oh my God, that's funny. Well, speaking of natural disasters, let's say we should finally finish up this. Hey, Charles, good to see you.
Hey, Charles,
in Texas. All right, but how about we finally wrap up this presentation once and for all?
Yes, let's carry on with this hurricane called Mitch.
Yeah. Okay. Whereas, oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second. I just want to make sure, because like I said, since there are some videos, I just want to make sure that when I do share this, that the sound is actually working. Oh, and also, because since you're on your iPad, I just messaged Rosie to tell her to message me here on the phone, because obviously when I do my slideshows, I can't see comments or who's doing this, unfortunately. So when she messages, when she messages me, I'll stop it. If I'm still on the slideshow, I'll stop it and I'll bring her right in.
Like I can access chats on the iPad. I just won't be able to.
Oh, okay.
Screen.
Do you have the private chat one then, or?
I have a chat and I have comments, and that's it.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do. So, like I said, she's not.
Sorry, I'm not that technical.
Alrighty, so let's finish this up. I believe it was okay. This was where. This is where. So where we were at was, I wasn't sure if you saw the entire slideshow last week, Wade, but we were getting to the impact that Hurricane Mitch had on Honduras, and this was when rescue teams were going out trying to search for survivors, but all they found were victims. So it's a pretty sad story at this point.
Yeah.
And also one other thing, if you remember the last time you were on, I was talking about a boat that was called the Phantom. Remember that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that had vanished while it was still in the hurricane. So we will get to their fate in just a little while, but we're going to finish up the rest of the impact that Hurricane Mitch had in Central America. So, like I said, they were searching for survivors, but unfortunately, since they couldn't find anyone, the volunteers' mission changes from rescue to recovery. Amidst the smell of death, they continued digging around the clock. And also, we were, in addition to this, since, again, I know you weren't on last week, we also talked about 2 American rescuers that were actually part of the Honduran fire department of Tegucigalpa. So I actually got this from a documentary because I thought their story was really fascinating. So this actually is from a lot of that show, but it was still a good story to tell. So we're actually talking about them right now in this slide. So obviously their own safety is now at risk. Riley and Tana are working around the clock, recovering bodies buried by mud, when Tana, separated by her team, collapses with exhaustion. Tara didn't know how many times they crossed one particular river, but at one point she slipped in the mud and fell and just couldn't get up, and getting sucked downstream a little, and at one point contemplated death. Luckily, Tana's German Shepherd, Gara, is along on the search operation. When she sees her master go down, the dog doesn't give up. It was then Tana knew that somebody needed her and everyone else, and it just happened to be her dog, and believed that she saved her life. Oh, see, here's another issue I'll have to fix later. Now, while moving slowly for several days offshore Honduras, Hurricane Mitch drew moisture from the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, producing high amounts of rainfall, over 300 millimeters per day. Late on October 29th, Mitch weakened to tropical storm status. So that was supposed to be the first one to show up. It moved slowly across Honduras, turning to the west. The large circulation continued to drop heavy rainfall throughout Central America, particularly in Honduras and Nicaragua, causing widespread flooding. While over land, Mitch initially maintained an area of deep convection, which allowed it to maintain tropical storm force winds. On October 31st, the circulation became poorly defined while moving over increasingly mountainous terrain. However, the strongest convection persisted over the adjacent Pacific Ocean, and the NHC noted the potential for Mitch to become a Pacific tropical cyclone. While over land, while over land, Mitch moved slowly westward through Central America, while continuing to produce deep convection over waters. Later that day, Mitch weakened into a tropical depression near the border of Guatemala and Honduras. An approaching trough weakened the ridge in the western Gulf of Mexico, allowing Mitch to make the long intended turn to the northwest. Convection gradually diminished, and the surface circulation of Mitch dissipated on November 1st near the border of Mexico and Guatemala. However, this did not signify the end of Mitch. Here's one of the videos. Now, this is nowhere going to be as long as those other videos. This is just about 10 minutes, so it shouldn't be too bad. Can you hear anything?
No.
Oh, see, this is exactly what I was fearing. So let me try this quickly.
So if we can lip read.
It's kind of a little bit hard to lip read because of how grainy it is. And I don't know what's going on. Oh, here we go. Okay, I was trying to figure out why wasn't this working, but now it seems to be. So bear with me for just a second here. Hello, Vonnie. Okay, so let me stop the screen for just a second because there was another way of doing this. Oh, also share system audio. Here's what we're looking for. Okay, let's try that. Now, you tell me if you could hear it this time. Let's try this again.
The central and southern plains is some heavy rain that could be belting places like Dallas a little bit later on this evening and also through tomorrow. But first, let's take a look at our tropical update. And taking a look at the tropical Atlantic right now, the entire basin from the Gulf of Mexico on eastward, there is absolutely nothing to worry about. Take a look at the lack of convection, or basically a lot of blue skies over the Gulf Coast right now and much of the Gulf of Mexico. Nothing is going to be forming here. And some strong westerlies again over the mid and also the eastern parts of the Atlantic Ocean. We don't see anything organizing here at all. And off to the north, of course, you can see that big area of low pressure, which is now spinning around Nova Scotia and causing the real breezy conditions to last for several more days in the northeast. But our main concern during the last several days, of course, what was going to be happening with Mitch. Of course, a very intense hurricane several days back, the early part of the week, with winds gusting up to and over 200 miles per hour. Well, Mitch right now is over Honduras as of yet, believe it or not, and still moving west-southwestward, not making that west-northwesterly turn at all. So it's not being picked up by that big trough of pressure organizing now over the western United States. And there is some indication that if it continues moving in the west-southwesterly direction, it could reemerge over the eastern parts of the Pacific Ocean on the other side of Central America. Probably would be renamed. It could actually become a tropical storm again, maybe even something a little bit healthier than that as it moves on towards the west. But right now, it seems like it's still over Honduras, producing a lot of heavy rainfall, and that's going to be the big story there. Center circulation is at 3 o'clock this morning, Central Standard Time, 14.2 degrees north, 87.9 degrees west. Still over Honduras. It's on the land at the present hour and being ripped apart by the high terrain, the high mountainous terrain of Honduras and much of the Central American countries. Top sustained winds 40 miles per hour, still barely hanging on as a tropical storm. We thought yesterday at this time we could be looking at maybe a depression by now, but still 40 mile per hour winds, and it's held its own, still a tropical storm. West-southwesterly bound at 7 miles per hour, and the pressure all the way up to 1,000 millibars. Since at one time was down to 905 or 906 millibars, it has really weakened considerably during this past week. We still have tropical storm warnings in effect for the entire eastern side of Yucatan, getting all the way down to the entire coast of Honduras. But the big factor here is going to be the very, very heavy rainfall. This is one vantage point. We can look at the infrared satellite shot showing a lot of the bright white. But once you see the color enhancement, what we do here is show you the taller, colder cloud tops where the very heaviest of the rainfall is likely to be fallen. And you can see, once again, it's covering much of Honduras. And it must be just a tremendous situation down and through here. A lot of flooding has been going on. We told you yesterday it looked like for Honduras, the entire banana crop has been destroyed. And it looks like with this moving very, very slowly, catastrophic flooding will continue now as you look at the next 24 hours. because this thing will still be moving very, very slowly. And if it does move off into the Pacific Ocean and then begins to just mill around here for a while, even more heavy rainfall for Central America.
Good morning and happy Halloween. It's time now for Storm Watch. One of the big weather stories today continues to be some very heavy rain and flooding that continues to pound the southern plain states. And we'll have more information regarding that developing weather story coming up in just a moment. Right now, though, let's talk about the tropics. And our tropical update begins with Mitch. Mitch has been a very resilient system. Right now, though, it has been downgraded to a tropical depression, but it's still kind of hanging tough across Central America and still causing some very heavy amounts of rain. Believe it or not, we've had some reports from Honduras of over 2 feet worth of rainfall and still some soaking rains continuing across Central America. So again, that's the big story as far as the tropics are concerned. Here's the latest information that we have on Tropical Depression Mitch. It is still packing winds of 35 miles per hour and slowly drifting off towards the west. Now, what we think is going to be happening is that there is a possibility that Mitch may totally dissipate over land. Another possible scenario, though, could take Mitch back over the open waters heading out towards the Pacific. Although most of the forecast models are in somewhat agreement that it's likely that this system may eventually start to turn more towards the north, heading perhaps more towards the northwest in the next 48 to 72 hours or so. So that's something that we'll be watching for. At any rate, though, Mitch continues to slowly move, and as it does, it continues to dump some very heavy flooding downpours. Hardest hit so far today has been southern sections of Honduras, through Guatemala, El Salvador, and likewise Nicaragua, still getting pounded by very heavy rain. At least around coastal sections of Honduras, though, things have been improving after being swamped the last couple of days. And those tropical storm warnings that we had earlier, those have now dissipated. Those are now gone. But we still have small craft advisories in effect for these coastal regions. So again, mariners, be really careful. And of course, if you have any family or friends who live in Central America, keep it tuned to the Weather Channel because we'll make sure to keep you posted with the very latest information regarding Tropical Depression Mitch.
Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch here on the Weather Channel. We are keeping our eye on an area in West Texas where there's the potential for some severe thunderstorms. In fact, there have been some earlier in the day. Good news at this moment, no warnings in effect, but there is a watch, and we'll check that out for you and show you where the areas are affected in just a moment. But first off, we take a look at the tropics and the latest on Mitch, which is now a tropical depression. Yesterday at this time, as you probably remember, it was Tropical Storm Mitch and had lingered for quite a long time as a tropical storm, even though the center had been inland. But in the 9 a.m. advisory for this morning, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, coming out of the National Hurricane Center, Mitch was downgraded to a tropical depression. Here's the 3 p.m. information, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, maximum sustained winds associated with this tropical depression, still about 35 miles per hour. As had been expected, there has been little change in the strength during the day, and that's likely to continue over the next 10 to 12 hours. Moving toward the west at about 12 miles per hour, it has picked up speed a little bit. Earlier, it was moving along at about 7 miles per hour, so an increase in forward speed. Indications are that it will continue for a short time longer toward the west and then probably begin to turn more toward the west-northwest. That would take the depression along the spine of the mountainous terrain through Central America, and consequently moving over the mountain areas would further the weakening. Central pressure 1,001 millibars, and as of 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, the poorly defined center of Tropical Depression Mitch was located about 75 miles west-southwest of Santa Rosa de Copan in Honduras. And if you're plotting that on a map of the tropics, that would be latitude 14.5 north, longitude 89.9 west. Mitch continues to be a big rainmaker, even though the winds are down to 35 miles per hour. It continues to produce torrential rains in areas where we're really not getting complete reports on as to how much rain has fallen. But indications are there may have been in some areas of Honduras and Nicaragua and the mountainous terrain as much as 4 feet of rain. And of course, that continues to pose serious life-threatening problems with mudslides and flash flooding.
Yeah, you can see the segments are a lot more shorter than what they had a few days prior. So
Thanks for joining us here at the Weather Channel. I'm Christina Abernathy. We've got some rainy and some stormy weather to tell you about in parts of Texas. We'll have more on that coming up in just a moment. But first, time for our tropical update. Let's take a look at the latest on what's going on out there, including the latest on Mitch. The big picture shows things are really pretty quiet, except for Mitch. We don't see much going on in the Gulf of Mexico. Certainly not a lot going on in the Atlantic, but we are watching Mitch here in Central America. You can see the clouds associated with the depression and plenty of rain here. And the eventual fate of Mitch, still some question marks. We'll talk more about that in a moment. First, the latest coordinates have Tropical Depression Mitch centered at 14.6 north, 90.5 west. That puts the center near Guatemala. The winds 35 miles per hour, moving to the west at 9 miles per hour, and the pressure 1,002 millibars. Well, here's a closer view of Mitch, and no doubt seeing some windy conditions here and probably some pretty good amounts of rain for some areas. What we've got is a rather rugged terrain in this area, so that's certainly unfavorable for Mitch to maintain its strength or strengthen, while aloft we see high pressure aloft, and that's favorable for tropical development. So a couple of things going on here at sort of cross purposes. So again, still uncertain as to whether or not the mountains are going to have much of an impact, the terrain is going to have much of an impact, and the exact track of Mitch is still uncertain at this point too. We'll keep you posted and let you know the goings on and as it becomes a little clearer. But as for right now, what we can tell you is that it continues to drop heavy rains in these areas and probably getting some areas maybe with some windy conditions as well.
Okay. Oh, whoops. Oh, this is actual footage from the hurricane itself. This is actually considered one of the most infamous pieces of footage. Unfortunately, she said she wasn't sure what the results were. It was going to be like with the mountains. I'm afraid this video will answer her question. It's a pretty horrific video too. So this is actually one of the landslides that Mitch caused in Honduras. So here it is. Look at that. Whoa! Geez, that just tore that house up. That is gone.
Destrucción total. Y lo peor del caso que esta llena sucedió a medianoche.
And I told Lois this, obviously some of the videos in the actual area, obviously the people there speak Spanish, so it's not surprising.
Medidas de emergencia, señor, que pueden tomar los señores de los habitantes de la zona occidental de la República.
Look at that odd flash flooding.
Que ellos continúen resguardándose, ¿verdad? Para poder mantenerse alerta y vivos, ¿verdad? ¿Qué canal es este?
It's unbelievable. Jeez. Jeez, look how fast it's moving.
Yeah,
that is just unbelievable. That's crazy.
It's moving very quick, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, anyone that's gotten in, there's no way they'd be able to survive. Yeah, I know you weren't here last week, but in Honduras alone, tragically, Mitch caused anywhere between 6,500 to 7,000 deaths alone. It was bad.
I think a lot of the problems were probably caused because of the mountainous area that there is.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people didn't want to leave because they've had hurricanes before, but they usually just got like the rain of it. They never got the floods or the storm surge or anything like that. So unfortunately, they didn't really take it seriously. And many of these houses were perched on unstable hillsides and mountains.
And that's the problem when you get flash floods. If you're underneath that when it starts, that water's going to undermine everything that's on top of it.
Yeah,
and of course that's what's happened, and as a result, it's ended up washing away people's properties
and lives too.
Yeah,
this is probably one of the last ones involving the Weather Channel. I believe there might be one or two more, but this is only about 3 minutes. So this was the following day. This is where you start hearing the reports of the disaster. So yeah, just 3 minutes.
Snow and rain continue through the center of the country. Some of it has been very heavy the last 24 hours. All the details on where the rain is now and where it's going later on today in just a moment. First, the tropics and the latest on Mitch, which is a tropical depression over Central America, about 70 miles from Guatemala City, west-southwest of Guatemala City. Top sustained winds are 35, and Mitch moving west at 9 with a pressure of 1,002 millibars. That's the latest on tropical depression. Mitch, the remnants, of course, of a once Category 5 hurricane.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso, and a number of roads remain closed in Kansas because of very heavy rains that have fallen over the past 24 to 48 hours. We'll be checking radars from that part of the country in just a moment. First, let's check on the tropics for you and give you the latest on what is left of Mitch. It's spinning its way over Central America. Now, in our satellite picture here, you can see a bit of a twist to the cloud motion right here. This is Guatemala, here's Mexico, and here's El Salvador. And this is where we find Mitch as of 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Here's a look at the latest for you. 14.9 north and 91.6 west if you're plotting along at home. That position about 75 miles off to the west-northwest of the city of Guatemala in Guatemala. Winds 30 miles per hour. Movement still slow to the west. An estimated pressure about 1,005 millibars. So what we're looking at here is a very weak area of low pressure now. It has been all chewed up by the mountainous areas here in Central America. But with the moisture in place and the effect of the mountains, we have seen tremendous amounts of rain, 15 to 25 inches of rain. And upon last check, I did see upwards of 450 fatalities because of the flooding and the weather associated with Mitch. And there you can see the circulation pretty much right in this area here. What happens to the remnants of Mitch with time? Well, there are indications that Mitch will continue to move slowly west or west-northwest, and eventually it could drift up towards the Gulf of Mexico and get absorbed by a system coming into the Pacific Northwest today, and that would maybe eventually hit the southeast with added showers and thunderstorms. But we're not looking for much of a comeback, if any, with this now weak system.
There's one more clip.
Cascades by morning. Tropical Depression Mitch. Now, this is the last advisory that the Hurricane Center is going to issue on Mitch. 30-mile-an-hour winds near Tapachula, Mexico, right on the border with Guatemala, moving west. But there's not a whole lot of identity to it, although there seems to be some increasing convection, some increasing rainfall over the Pacific Ocean, a broad circulation. But we'll have to see whether it regenerates in the next few days near the Pacific Ocean.
Okay. Now, we mostly discussed last week about the impact that Hurricane Mitch had on Honduras. But as far as the other countries that it affected in Central America, the other country receiving the brunt of Hurricane Mitch's elements was Nicaragua, which, while damage was less severe than in Honduras, significant destruction did occur. Though Mitch never entered Nicaragua, Its large circulation caused extensive rainfall with estimates of over 50 inches. In some places, as much as 25 inches of rain fell on coastal areas. The flank of the Casita volcano failed and turned into a lahar from excessive rain. That's an actual photo from the volcano after the lahar was made. Which, by the way, for those of you that don't know what a lahar is, the term of it, a lahar it's an Indonesian term for a mud flow. So the resulting mudslide ultimately covered an area 10 miles long and 5 miles wide. 2 million people in Nicaragua were directly affected by the hurricane. Across the country, Mitch's heavy rains damaged 17,600 houses and destroyed 23,900, displacing 368,300 of the population. 340 schools and 90 health centers were severely damaged or destroyed. Sewage systems in the electricity subsector were severely damaged, and combined with property damage totaled to $300 million. Transportation was greatly affected by the hurricane as well. The rainfall left 70% of the roads unusable or destroyed and greatly damaged 92 bridges. Over 1,700 miles of highways or access roads needed replacement or subsequent to the storm, especially in the northern part of the country and along portions of the Pan-American Highway. Total transportation damage amounted to $300 million as well. Agricultural losses were significant, including the deaths of 50,000 animals, mostly bovines. Crops and fisheries were affected greatly as well, and combined with agricultural losses, damage totaled to $185 million. The situation was further compounded by a total of 75,000 live landmines left over from the counterinsurgency of the 1980s that were calculated to have been uprooted and relocated by the floodwaters. In all, Hurricane Mitch caused at least 3,800 deaths in Nicaragua, of which more than 2,000 were killed in the towns of El Porvenir and Rolando Rodriguez from the landslide at the Casita volcano. The mudslide buried at least 4 villages completely in several feet of mud. Throughout the entire country, the hurricane left between 500,000 and 800,000 homeless. In all, damage in Nicaragua is estimated at $1 billion. Many thousands of homes and a great number of crops and livestock were destroyed throughout the rest of Central America as well. Now, in Belize, the hurricane was less severe than initially predicted, though Mitch still caused heavy rainfall across the country. Numerous rivers exceeded their crests, though the rainfall was beneficial to trees in mountainous areas. The flooding caused extensive crop damage and destroyed many roads. I think there was supposed to be a picture before in that one space. Throughout the country, 11 people died because of Hurricane Mitch. Similar to the rest of Central America, Hurricane Mitch's heavy rains caused mudslides and severe flooding over Guatemala. The flooding destroyed 6,000 houses and damaged 20,000 others, displacing over 730,000 and forcing over 100,000 to evacuate. In addition, the flooding destroyed 27 schools and damaged 286 others, 175 severely. Flooding caused major damage to crops, while landslides destroyed cropland across the country. The most severely affected crops for domestic consumption were tomatoes, bananas, corn, other vegetables, and beans, with damage totaling to $48 million. Export crops such as bananas or coffee were greatly damaged as well, with damage amounting to $325 million. Damage to plantations and soil totaled to $121 million. The flooding also caused severe damage to the transportation infrastructure, including the loss of 37 bridges. Across the country, flooding damaged or destroyed 840 miles of roads, of which nearly 400 miles were sections of major highways. In all, Hurricane Mitch caused $748 million and 268 deaths in Guatemala. In addition, Mitch caused 11 indirect deaths when a plane crashed during the storm. Oh, there's the other picture. Oh, these are other pictures that were taken from Belize. So I'll just put those up for just a few seconds so you guys can check them out for yourselves. And strangely, these were the only photographs I ever found that detailed Hurricane Mitch's impact in Belize. So you can see, obviously, it's not as destructive as it was in Honduras and Nicaragua as well as Guatemala, but it still had quite a major impact for Belize as well. Now, while drifting through El Salvador, the hurricane drops immense amounts of precipitation, resulting in flash flooding and mudslides through the country. Multiple rivers, including the Rio Grande de San Miguel and the Lempa River, overflow, contributing to overall damage. This was the only photo I was able to find in this case for El Salvador. The flooding damaged more than 10,000 houses, leaving around 84,000 homeless and forcing 500,000 to evacuate. Crop damage was severe, with serious flooding occurring on 386 square miles of pasture or cropland. The flooding destroyed 37% of the bean production, 19% of the corn production, and 20% losses in sugar canes. There were heavy losses in livestock as well, including the deaths of 10,000 cattle. Total agricultural and livestock damage amounted to $154 million. In addition, the flooding destroyed 2 bridges, damaged 1,200 miles of unpaved roads. In all, Mitch caused nearly $400 million in damage and 240 deaths. In Costa Rica, Mitch dropped heavy rains, causing flash flooding and mudslides across the country, mostly in the northeastern part of the country. The storm impacted 2,135 homes to some degree, of which 241 were destroyed, leaving 4,000 homeless. Throughout the country, the rainfall and mudslides affected 126 bridges and 800 miles of roads, mostly on the Inter-American Highway, which was affected by Hurricane Cesar 2 years prior. Mitch affected 115 square miles of croplands, causing damage to both export and domestic crops. In all, Hurricane Mitch caused $92 million in damage and 7 deaths. Due to Mitch's large circulation, it dropped heavy precipitation as far south as Panama and Colombia, South America, especially in the Darien and Chiriquí provinces of Panama. The flooding washed away a few roads and bridges and damaged numerous houses and schools, leaving thousands homeless. The hurricane left 3 deaths in Panama. Oh, this is another piece of the footage of the impact that the hurricane had. I think this is only about a 6-7 minute clip, so I think this is more of the aftermath. This is, I believe, in, I'm sure it will show it in just a second. So this is November 1st. Oh, this is in Honduras again. Yeah, now you can get a real good view of how bad it was when it affected Honduras from this bird's eye view or helicopter cam. You can still see there's some still major flooding that's going on.
And it makes it worse. It hampers recovery.
It does
as well, because it's still flowing water. They've got to decide how to get into the areas that are affected, and it's Well,
and that's basically what I was saying before earlier. You know, these volunteers rescue, their own safety is at risk when they're doing this, because if something happens, then they would have to try to call in additional help, try to now go help and rescue the rescuers.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to have to do, is to go in and rescue the people that were sent in to rescue those in the first place.
Oh, you notice I just cut there was some footage that was cut. I actually had to cut some of that footage myself out, because there were some moments where there were some people, including kids, that were so greatly affected by the hurricane that they barely had any clothes or anything to wear. So obviously, we're not going to watch that kind of stuff or have that broadcasted. So I cut all that out. I didn't want that broadcasted on live.
No, you couldn't.
Yeah, that is just unbelievable. Just the amount of and what I also said too last week, some of these buildings that Mitch destroyed were very historic. I mean, there were some buildings that actually dated back, some of them were about 350 years old. So you also had landmarks, historic landmarks, just completely wiped off the map. And obviously that's stuff that they can never replace. Right, they're showing some of the same footage again, so I'm just gonna move forward. Okay, here, we'll go right here for me. Yeah, for some reason they show some of the same footage again. Jeez. And you can even see, obviously, they still have to try to do whatever they can to either rescue or try to provide, any type of supplies, even when the flooded water is still in progress. Yeah, they even have horses with them. Here, that's probably them rescuing survivors. A lot of them are kids. Oh, now this is Nicaragua. Okay. It looks like Nicaragua is more rural, but that doesn't mean that there were houses that once stood across the farmlands.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so this is where they're all trying to get supplies for the survivors. And numerous countries did support them, so they're probably getting this from the United States as well as other countries.
Yeah, because you've got the Red Crescent and the Red Cross there, so they've both done a joint.
They immediately responded very quickly after the hurricane, so they did not wait and see what was going to happen next. Yeah, I can't tell exactly where some of these folks are from, but I would assume that some of these are American soldiers.
Yeah, you would have also had some of the Royal Air Force and Army troops from the UK would have also assisted as well, because we have a military base in Belize at the time. So
yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, Belize was really not long after Belize got its independence, because it served as almost like a British territory. At that time, it was known, prior to 1981, it was known as British Honduras. So now, just like what you see with almost every disaster, a lot of these people are living basically like in shacks or huts or tent cities almost. So it was, again, it really goes to show how bad this hurricane really affected everybody.
It's strange, isn't it? You look at how much damage has been caused, and yet the children, they just look totally unfazed by it all.
Because they're probably they're probably not used to seeing this kind of destruction. So
and they're just walking around, they're getting on with things, they're smiling while their parents are wondering where they're going to stay the next night and where the food's going to come from. They're just blissfully unaware of what chaos has been caused. You know, it's bizarre.
It is. It really is. It has kind of an eerie feeling to it, but you can't really blame the kids because for a lot of these kids, all this is new to them. You know, nobody was prepared for this when this eventually impacted Central America. It's even more surprising that they managed to even get crop. They even found some crops that they were able to sell.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Von says, you know, the scary part of it too is that the people who are stranded cannot see anything that is going on further around until somebody else manages to get to them.
Yep, that's right.
You know, they're just looking at the issue that they're facing, not realizing that other communities further afield have had to suffer the same. And it's not until they're picked up and they're all congregated in camps to help them that they go, wow, didn't realize this was that widespread.
So to kind of wrap things up on whatever happened with the remains of Mitch's surface circulation dissipated near the Honduras-Guatemala border on November 1st, and its remnants moved off the Mexican coast in the Bay of Campeche on November 2nd as a cloud system center. Although the surface low-pressure center dissipated, the remnants of Mitch maintained a circulation aloft that reached the Bay of Campeche. That day, get this, the system began to trigger convection once again. Late on November 3rd, the hurricane hunters observed a well-defined low-level center and flight level winds of 60 miles per hour. On that basis, the NHC began reissuing advisories on Mitch about 55 miles west-southwest of Campeche on the Yucatan Peninsula. Upon reforming, Mitch was moving to the east-northeast, influenced by an approaching cold front, and had redeveloped into a tropical storm. Early on November 4th, Tropical Storm Mitch made landfall just north of the city of Campeche with winds of about 40 miles per hour, and it quickly weakened into a tropical depression while crossing the Yucatan Peninsula. In Mexico, Mitch produced gusty winds and heavy rains on the Yucatan Peninsula, with Cancun on the Quintana Roo coast being the worst hit. 9 people were killed from the flooding, though damage was relatively minimal. The maximum 24-hour rainfall total for Mitch was 13.4 inches in Campeche, while the highest rainfall total was 16.85 inches in Ciudad del Carmen, if I'm saying that correctly. While Mitch was over eastern Mexico, it had a rain band of deep convection in the eastern periphery. With moderately warm waters and the potential for baroclinity, re-intensification was expected. Mitch accelerated to the northeast ahead of a cold front, moving across the Yucatan Peninsula and re-entering the Gulf of Mexico. After emerging into the Gulf of Mexico for a second time that day, Mitch reattained winds of 70 miles per hour and once again strengthened into a tropical storm, although it was not purely tropical cyclone. Convection was minimal near the core, and the strongest winds were over 230 miles from the center. Mitch accelerated toward the northeast, heading toward the U.S. coast of Florida as it interacted with the approaching cold front. I'll tell you what, we'll skip this one for now because I would like to finish this up. You know what? Actually, wait. Better yet. Yeah, that's about a 10-minute one. Yeah, because again, I would show them, but unfortunately, I got to wrap things up though with this. So here, we'll just play this one because this is only 3.5 minutes.
The season goes to the end of November for a reason. And that reason is you can still get tropical development, and we have some tonight. Let's take a look at Tropical Storm Mitch. Again, a shadow of its former self when it was a humongous hurricane over a week ago with 180 mile an hour maximum sustained winds when it was down here east of Nicaragua. And then it made that left-hand turn and smashed right into the coast. Took its time doing it, too. And because of that slow movement, the rain was unbelievable. Just unbelievable amounts here that caused whole mountainsides to collapse and villages to be buried. And the death toll is just, it boggles your mind. I mean, to just look at a map like this and a satellite picture and watch that system go in and watch the thunderstorms there for 36, 48 hours, 72 hours, the death toll in the thousands. It's incredible. The catastrophe which has befallen Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador is just unbelievable there. Well, the remnants of this system actually got back out over the water, and when these tropical systems do and the upper level winds are favorable, they can redevelop. And in this case, it did into a tropical storm again. And because that low-level circulation was still definable when it got all the way up here to the Gulf, that it got the same name, Mitch, which is now moving to the northeast toward Florida. But again, with winds only maximum sustained at 50 miles an hour, moving very quickly at 25 miles an hour. These are where the tropical storm warnings are out, including much of the west and east coast of Florida up to New Smyrna Beach and Tarpon Springs, the western parts of Cuba, including the Isle of Youth, and also the northwest Bahamas. Now, still a huge flare-up of thunderstorms near where we think the center of circulation is. It's probably right out in here on the northwest side of all this. But this all has to cross over South Florida. And that means more heavy rain. We've already had 4 or 5 inches of rain in some areas of South Florida. We're going to be getting more, perhaps doubling that amount in a few spots. 10 inches of rain, that's going to cause some flooding in many of these low-lying areas, and most of South Florida is a low-lying area. But also probably the biggest threat, severe weather. We've already had some reports of isolated tornadoes.
Yeah.
Right now, there is a tornado warning out for central Broward County for about the next 20 minutes. There is a tornado watch, which has been extended all the way till 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have big thunderstorms scattered about here where you see the yellow shading. Let's get in here a little bit closer. Broward County right in here, and it's right here west of Boca Raton, west along I-75, where the possible tornado is indicated on Doppler radar, perhaps moving up toward the Palm Beach area. Also watch out inland from Naples along the Tamiami Trail, Alligator Alley. Looks pretty nasty, and other storms are developing from Key Largo up to the south suburbs of Miami, moving up over Biscayne Bay and on up in through Miami Beach. So conditions are favorable for tornadic development tonight. We've already had a couple of isolated tornado touchdowns, one in Key Largo that may have caused some injuries. So a nasty night tonight in South Florida. That's the only game in town as far as the tropics are concerned, and you would expect that this time of the year because we are well past the peak of the season in November when things are really winding down. Hopefully, once we get Mitch out of the way and across Florida, and the timing here is probably overnight tonight through the early part of the day tomorrow, and then it'll be moving out into the Atlantic, and hopefully that'll be it.
Yeah, so this, you can kind of say that this was also the only footage that I really had, I guess you can say, from an American standpoint of Mitch, because for some strange reason I was unable to find any footage of Tropical Storm Mitch when it affected Florida. So I think this might be, oh, you know what? No, forget about that. This is about a 20-minute one, so we're just going to have to move forward with that. So November, I'm sorry that I just really want to wrap this up.
That's 20 minutes long. We'll forget that one.
Yeah, forget about that one. I'll save that for another time. So on November 5th, the circulation became elongated, and the NHC commented that if it were not the remnants of Mitch, they probably would not be calling it a tropical cyclone. The storm still strengthened to a tropical storm to reach winds of 65 miles per hour and causing a storm surge of up to 4 feet in the lower Florida Keys before making a final landfall on the southwestern coast of Florida in the United States near Naples. Key West International Airport reported peak wind gusts of 55 miles per hour and sustained winds of 40 miles per hour, the only reported tropical storm force in the state. Offshore, the Fowey Rocks Light reported wind gusts of 73 miles per hour. In addition, Mitch caused moderate rainfall, peaking at 7 inches in Jupiter, though some estimates indicate localized totals of up to 10 inches. It quickly crossed the state, producing 7 confirmed tornadoes. The tornadoes produced extensive damage in the middle and upper Florida Keys during the late afternoon and evening hours. 5 of the 7 were directly associated with the supercell thunderstorm, which moved from the Florida Straits to the middle and upper Florida Keys associated with Tropical Storm Mitch. This severe weather event was well anticipated by the meteorologists at the National Weather Service office in Miami. Warnings and statements were issued at frequent intervals during this event. Now, as far as the actual tornadoes themselves, I don't have any actual photos of the tornadoes, but I do have radar images, though. Residents in the middle and upper Florida Keys received a minimum of 20 minutes lead time between the first tornado warning and the first confirmed touchdown. The first confirmed tornado report came from Grassy Key and Layton, east of Marathon in the Middle Keys at 5 p.m. EST. So that was, and now then really not long after the first tornado that developed, before that, tornado damage was also reported on U.S. Highway 1 at mile marker 80, east of Marathon at 5:10 p.m. EST. Additional damage was reported near mile marker 98, with the most severe damage and injuries between mile marker 100 and 106 near Key Largo at 6:25 p.m., including an overturned tractor-trailer truck. So this was basically the different times of the radar of these tornadoes. The strongest of which was rated an F2 in tropical storm force winds, and the storm emerged into the southwestern Atlantic Ocean. Though through the combined efforts of the National Weather Service office in Miami, the Monroe County Emergency Operations Center, and the local South Florida media, no lives were lost. In the Florida Keys, multiple damaged buildings that had been damaged by Hurricane Georges were leveled by Mitch. Tornadoes from the storm damaged or destroyed 645 houses across the state, in addition to injuring 65 people. Gusty winds left. See, I think I might have to fix some of this later. Gusty winds left 100,000 without power during the storm's passage. In all, Tropical Storm Mitch caused $40 million in damage in Florida and 2 deaths from drowning when 2 boats capsized. Later that day, a hurricane hunter's flight could not locate a well-defined center associated with Mitch. I don't know what that is all about, but I'm going to get rid of that. Get out of here. Jeez. Later that day, a hurricane hunter's flight could not locate a well-defined center associated with Mitch. Instead, observing an it says elongated circulation embedded in the cold front. I'm not sure. Okay, here we go. Based on the observations, the NHC declared Mitch as an extratropical cyclone as it passed over the Bahamas, causing minimal damage. So we're going to fast forward again. Get this. I'm sure you probably wouldn't expect this to occur. The extratropical remnants of Mitch continued quickly to the northeast. On November 6th, they passed north of Bermuda, and the following day intensified slightly to winds of 70 miles per hour. As an extratropical cyclone, Mitch passed west of Ireland and the United Kingdom. In Ireland, the storm produced gusts as high as 90 miles per hour and 30-foot waves. The winds knocked down trees and power lines, leaving over 30,000 homes without power. One tree fell onto a car in Louth, severely injuring the driver. In Dublin, high winds knocked the roof off of a building, and several other buildings nationwide were damaged. The storm caused airports to close and ferry service to be suspended. By November 9th, the remnants passed west of the British Isles and were last monitored by the NHC later that day, passing north of Scotland and over the northern Faroe Islands of Denmark, causing very little damage before finally dissipating for good. Had it continued moving northeast for another day or two, the extratropical cyclone of Mitch would have ended up affecting Norway and Sweden. At the time, Mitch was the strongest Atlantic hurricane observed in the month of October, though it has since been surpassed by Hurricane Wilma of the 2005 season. In addition, Mitch is the 8th most intense Atlantic hurricane on record, tied with Hurricane Dean in 2007 in terms of pressure. Mitch was the final blow in a year marked by weather-related catastrophes. Just a month before, Hurricane Georges had left massive destruction and hundreds dead in several Caribbean nations, including Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Earlier, El Nino had caused record flooding and droughts in Ecuador, Peru, and other countries. After each disaster, particularly after Mitch, national governments and the international community of agencies, charitable groups, and private citizens quickly mobilized to care for the injured, the homeless, and the hungry. At the same time, work on long-term efforts to rebuild shattered lives and restore destroyed economies. After the disaster caused by Hurricane Mitch, countries around the world donated significant aid, totaling $6.3 billion throughout Central America, which was recovering from an economic crisis that occurred in 1996. Many wished to continue the growth of the infrastructure and economy. In addition, after witnessing the vulnerability to hurricanes, the affected governments endeavored to prevent such a disaster from occurring again. Although the people of Central America are used to misfortunes, both natural and man-made, this one left them numbed. No other event in recent memory has caused such destruction in terms of lives lost and property destroyed. Being the deadliest Atlantic hurricane in over 200 years, Mitch caused catastrophic impacts across its path, but the most disastrous impacts came from Honduras, which suffered over half of the total deaths. While stalling over the Western Caribbean Sea, Mitch's strong winds produced strong waves, damaging local coral reefs. Later, the storm's immense rainfall led to runoff polluted with debris and fresh water. This resulted in disease occurring within the coral. However, the hurricane's upwelling cooled the warm water temperatures, preventing significant bleaching and destruction of the coral reef. So we're just going to keep going. We're almost there. Mitch caused such massive and widespread damage that Honduran President Carlos Roberto Flores claimed that it destroyed 50 years of progress in the country. Honduras, the country most affected by the hurricane, received significant aid for the millions impacted by the hurricane. We have 75% of our major infrastructure either destroyed, damaged, or torn apart. Our agricultural is in shambles. All of our major crops, our export products, gone. Honduran President Carlos Flores told CNN in 1998, "This is something that happens once in a century, but this is the only country that we have. So we have to pick it up, and we will." Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter toured neighboring Nicaragua in November, and is estimated it would take 15 years to fully rebuild and recover. Mexico quickly gave help, sending 700 tons of food, 11 tons of medicine, 4 rescue planes, rescue personnel, and trained search dogs. Cuba also volunteered, sending a contingent of physicians to the country. The U.S. administration offered at first troops stationed in Honduras, and then withdrew them a few days after the storm. They also at first offered only $2 million in aid, which came as a shock to residents and President Carlos Roberto Flores alike. The United States later increased their offer to $70 million. The Honduran government distributed food, water, and medical services to the hurricane victims, including the more than 4 million without water. In addition, the country initially experienced a sharp increase in the unemployment rate, largely due to the destruction of croplands. However, rebuilding provided jobs in the following years. Following the storm, officials in Honduras requested international assistance, which totaled $2.8 billion over a several-year period. Despite this, the gross domestic product began decreasing at the end of 1998 and contracted by 1.9% in 1999. Okay, see, again, I'm sorry I got to skip these, but I just really want to wrap this up. The national gross domestic product, GDP, only grew at a rate of 3% due to the storm, compared with 5.1% in 1997 due to damaged infrastructure and lingering effects. In 1999, the economy of Honduras contracted by 1.9%, largely due to the storm. The Honduran government increased spending 24.7%, much of its emergency funds, to restore communications and provide relief, which caused economic deficits. This caused inflation to increase 13.6% to 15.7%. The Honduran government adjusted its economic plan, including privatization of various federal entities. For 2 years, the government temporarily halted taxes to businesses affected by the hurricane. In the storm's immediate aftermath, officials enacted a widespread curfew after reports of looting and vandalism. The government temporarily restricted constitutional rights for 15 days to maintain order. Officials urged residents to restrict water and fuel use, and alcohol sales were halted. The widespread flooding and the crippled infrastructure forced officials to rely on a limited number of helicopters to operate search and rescue missions and deliver supplies. A helicopter carrying 4 people, including Tegucigalpa mayor and potential presidential candidate Cesar Catalanos, crashed on November 1st while touring flood damage, killing everyone aboard. So that wasn't enough. In some areas, residents did not receive assistance until November 12th, more than 2 weeks after Mitch's landfall. About 285,000 people remain in 1,375 shelters, many of them schools, by 3 weeks after the hurricane struck. Some sports stadiums and churches were also used as makeshift shelters. Overcrowding at shelters caused outbreaks of various diseases. Jeez. Due to the hurricane and widespread destruction, the hurricane caused outbreaks of malaria, dengue, if I'm saying that right, cholera, and various fever and respiratory illnesses throughout Central America. Over 2,328 cases of cholera, that's what it is, were reported, killing 34 people. Ongoing flooding caused an outbreak of leptospirosis, notably in Cortes Department. 400 cases of leptospirosis were reported in Nicaragua, killing 7 people. There were over 1,357 cases of dengue reported, though no deaths were reported from the disease. Guatemala was most affected by the bacterium, where most of the deaths occurred from contaminated food. There was also widespread food and water shortages, leaving villagers near starvation. Damaged crops also prevented the export of cash crops, and exports decreased by 9.4% in 1999. Many of the people left homeless also became unemployed, and there were reductions in exports and economic growth. Officials set up shelters that housed 285,000 people for about a month. In Tegucigalpa, where the Choluteca River was dammed by a landslide, a temporary lagoon filled with sewage persisted for about 2 months, until a crew from the United States Army Corps of Engineers and United States Geological Survey dug a channel to drain the water. The majority of bridges and secondary roads in Honduras were heavily damaged or destroyed, causing many communities to become isolated and unable to receive assistance. The magnitude of the damage was so great that it is said that existing road maps were rendered useless. Even before the storm struck, the government of Honduras issued an appeal for international assistance. In the immediate aftermath, the United States provided $875,000 in aid. And these are actually some of the aftermath photos. A portion went to purchasing and delivering food, while the majority used airplanes to participate in rescue missions and deliver supplies, such as plastic sheets and water. The United States ultimately gave $15 million in aid to Honduras through various United Nations organizations. Mexico donated food, medicine, and clothing, and Cuba sent a team of doctors and mobile hospitals. Uruguay donated a pump for the city of Choluteca to restore water there. Several European countries sent aid to Honduras, in addition to donations from the European Union. France sent medical equipment, and the government of Japan provided a field hospital that helped 300 patients per day in the center of Tegucigalpa. Following the storm, the United States Nations Development Program sent a team to Honduras and El Salvador to determine the needs of the population. These are some of the rare photos I found of those actually that were severely injured. The Honduran government requested the team to assess the social economic impact of the storm. The World Food Program provided $17 million worth of food to the country. The Pan-American Health Organization focused on restoring water systems by providing latrines, while UNICEF sent large water tanks. Let's keep going. We're almost there. The Inter-American Development Bank approved $197.4 million in loans in 1998, most of which due to Hurricane Mitch. The loans were to assist in rebuilding damaged infrastructure, including for water systems, transportation, and houses. Various countries provided nearly $2.8 billion to the country in aid, which limited the annual debt following the hurricane's damage. The foreign aid due to the storm largely ended by 2003. Overall cost for reconstruction was estimated at $2.5 billion, which was estimated to take 4 years. The cost for repairing the damaged houses was estimated at $484 million. Following the storm, workers made emergency repairs to the destroyed bridges and roads. The cost for rebuilding roads was higher than the damage cost of planning for future flooding. Within a month, there were repairs to the power grid to a level of 550 MW, or 91.7% of what it was before Mitch struck. Water companies restored water to 60% of Tegucigalpa within a month of the storm striking. Okay, I think this might be the last one where it's actually talking about the impact of Honduras. Millions of Hondurans were left homeless as a result of Mitch, and the most substantial reconstruction efforts took place in Honduras and neighboring Nicaragua. Hundreds of refugee centers, each holding thousands of displaced Hondurans, were set up in cities. However, many of these centers were ineffective at providing food and resources. Part of this was due to confusion between the government, churches, and local commerce groups over how supplies were to be allocated and distributed. There were significant resources intended for refugees, but authorities often hoarded it in heavily guarded warehouses. The entire hurricane and subsequent refugee crisis did bring to light the problems Hondurans face relating to contagious diseases, and the country received considerable medical attention in the aftermath of Mitch. While those in cities had at least some form of access to relief supplies, Honduras' rural population, which makes up most of the country, was almost completely annihilated. The damage caused by winds and flooding, combined with most of these affected living in poverty, meant most, if not all, buildings were destroyed, roads were wiped out, and communication systems collapsed. Because of the region's low human development and a high poverty rate of about 75%, rural areas received very little aid compared to those in most urban areas. The urban areas were able to rebuild much faster while the rest of the country languished. In these regions, the effects of Mitch are still very prevalent in the modern day. Thousands lack clean water and shelter. Little infrastructure has been rebuilt, and diseases are widespread due to the lack of proper hygiene facilities. Today, the Honduran government provides very little in terms of support, with most of the international community doing the same. However, some humanitarian aid groups continue to visit Honduras to help those still affected by constructing new homes, hospitals, and orphanages, installing water filtration systems and latrines, and providing medical and dental care. So we're just going to finish this up. Okay, I'm there's so much here. I'm gonna have to. I'm sorry I have to do this, but
I don't think you realise how big your little project really was.
I really didn't think it was that big. I really didn't. So, okay. The shattering blow Hurricane Mitch dealt to Central America was not an isolated event. The isthmus has the dubious distinction of lying in the path of many tropical storms. In fact, the word hurricane probably comes from the language of the Taino people who inhabited the Caribbean area in pre-Columbian times. During the colonial period, maritime records of Spain and other European powers relate the enormous losses of ships to storms, many of them hurricanes. Over the years, hurricane losses on the open water declined as ships grew more seaworthy, but onshore damage increased as a function of demographics and changing land use. In 1950, the region's 5 countries had a population of 8.3 million. The Latin American Demographic Center estimates that by 2025, which is next year, the region's population will swell to more than 55 million. Many more people are at risk today than decades ago, and many more will be at risk in the future. Moreover, large numbers of these people, for the most part poor, end up in the cities where they must resort to building on precarious hillsides and in floodplains. Those remaining in the countryside convert forests into agricultural fields and firewood, thus reducing the absorptive capacity of the land and its ability to reduce the impact of heavy rains. After Mitch, former Honduran Environment Minister Carlos Mendita stated that extensive deforestation in his country had compounded the impact of the storm by some 30%. Okay, hang on one second. I'm just going to, because again, these ones, I got to just keep going. I just got to keep moving forward with this. Okay, yeah. So, okay, now I know exactly where we are. We're finally getting down to the end. We're just going to conclude it this way. So you remember I was talking about those rescuers that I was talking about earlier, Tana and Riley Wooten?
Yeah.
Remember? So as far as whatever happened with them, 3 days after Mitch's landfall, Tana and Riley finally take a break and anxiously return to their house outside Tegucigalpa, where they left their 10-year-old son, Kyle. It was about 3 or 4 days before they were able to go back home. When they returned home, they were relieved to see their house was still standing and their son and mate completely unharmed. And get this, it's not surprising, but the Wooten's story is a rare happy ending in the devastating drama caused by Hurricane Mitch. Now, we talked about different countries and the death tolls. Let's do a quick recap on this. The death tolls in each country affected are beyond anyone's beliefs. Over 6,500 to 7,000 people dead in Honduras, 3,800 in Nicaragua, 11 in Belize, 268 in Guatemala, 240 in El Salvador, 7 in Costa Rica, 3 in Panama, 9 in Mexico, 3 in Jamaica, and 2 in Florida in the United States. Now, if you combine all those death tolls together into one, however, the death toll combined is staggering. Over 11,000 people dead. Thousands more are missing and are presumed dead, including all 31 crew on board the schooner Phantom. I mean, from what we speculate, what must have happened was the boat sank in the worst possible conditions. You're in the eye wall of a Category 5 hurricane. You have winds in excess of maybe 150 or 180, or in Mitch's case, maybe 180 miles per hour. You have seas in excess of 40 to 50 feet high. The chances that either in a lifeboat or in a life jacket that they could have actually survived being in a Category 5 eye wall were nil. Deaths due to catastrophic flooding made it the deadliest Atlantic hurricane in history after the Great Hurricane of 1780, displacing the Galveston Hurricane of 1900 as the second deadliest on record and the most deadly storm in the Western Hemisphere. No final international death toll has been established due to the estimate extensive damage, but at least 11,374 people were confirmed to have been killed, with 9,191 to another 11,000 more left missing by the end of 1998. Some estimates put the figure as high as 18,000. However, the true death toll may never be known. On November 2nd, a helicopter dispatched by the British destroyer HMS Sheffield discovered life rafts in 7 orange life vests labeled SV Phantom off the eastern coast of I can't say that one. The United States Coast Guard searched until November 4th when they observed the debris from the ship. It was all that was found of Phantom. After 6 days, the U.S. Coast Guard stops their search for survivors. All 31 crew members on board were presumed killed. The bodies of Captain Guyan March and his crew are never recovered. And here's the thing. They covered an area the size of Colorado, searching for the boat. Never found it. No signs of life, no human remains, no bodies, very little debris. So a memorial service was held for them in their honor on December 12th. So this actually, I believe, oh wow, this actually I believe was the final slide. So again, kind of like a little bit of another recap. Hurricane Mitch claims more than 11,000 lives and causes over $6 billion in Central America, Mexico, and Florida in the United States. The exact total dollar damage for Cuba, Jamaica, Cayman Islands, Colombia, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Faroe Islands of Denmark remain unknown. In Central America, particularly Honduras and Nicaragua, kind of more focusing on that, the destruction to the infrastructure of both countries was just absolutely unbelievable. Although much of the countries have recovered and strongly rebuilt their villages, neighborhoods, towns, and cities since then, even 25 years later, one can still see leftovers and skeletal remains of some buildings from the destruction of Hurricane Mitch. Around the world, the families of the lost Phantom crew grieve without a chance for closure. The tragedy also sinks the Windjammer cruise line. So to put it to an end, okay, this is the last one, sorry. As a result of the extreme damage and loss of life it caused, less than a year after the hurricane, in the spring of 1999, the Honduras delegation to the World Meteorological Organization requested the name Mitch be retired following the hurricane. The request was granted, and the name Mitch was retired from the Atlantic Hurricane naming list by the World Meteorological Organization and National Hurricane Center, never again to be used for a future Atlantic hurricane. The 25-member committee voted in support to replace the name with Matthew, which was first used in 2004. That name was later retired following its usage in 2016 due to the devastation it caused in Haiti in early October of that year, and was subsequently replaced by Martin. In October of 2008, 10 years after Hurricane Mitch, heavy rains caused severe flooding in Honduras and 20,000 people were displaced. Today, the work of rebuilding communities, infrastructure, and the economy continues. For forecasters, researchers, meteorologists, storm watchers, and spotters, hurricane hunters, and survivors, Mitch provides some valuable lessons learned the hard way. And always remember this, because this is actually a good piece of advice for any future hurricane, typhoon, cyclone, and even other types of severe weather, like tornadoes, whatnot. Always remember this. Even though we got some of the way better technology than what we had back in 1998, and also some of the best hurricane hunters and storm spotters, and of course, weather prediction, like, Weather Channel, always remember this. The models could be, even still today, the models could be wrong, the forecasters could be wrong. And you always have to be on guard to watch out for unusual storms like Mitch that can do unpredictable things. So, and that, oh my God, is finally it. We made it. We did it.
I like the bit at the end there where he said 2-hour special, which is probably more like a 2-month special.
Oh my God. It is, jeez. It is such a relief that I finally finished. Yes.
Right, let's get the balloons out. Let's start the music. Let's have a party. The thing is though, is the lessons learned by these individual countries. They're going to look at things and they're going to say, why did this happen? They're going to look at floodplains. They're going to look at the mountainsides and what's on the mountainsides. They know if there's loose soil around, any heavy rains is going to displace that soil. And that is all going to go somewhere, and it's all going to go downhill.
Yeah.
So anything that's in the way of that area is going to get affected. And we have that here. We've had a heavy rainfall, we've had heavy frosts, we've had snow. And as a result, some of our farmland around here locally has been flooded. Now, the problem we've got is a lot of our farmers have been going around filling up all the ditches around the edges of their fields.
Yeah.
Because land is valuable, and the bigger your crop, the more money you can make from it. So they've filled in these ditches to expand the amount of crop they can grow. then the problem comes is when they get heavy rain or we get some snowfall and so on, there's no ditches there to disperse that water. There's nowhere for it to go.
That's right.
And in areas where there are a few ditches, those ditches fill up very quickly and then flood.
Exactly.
And then as a result, roads are impassable, the fields are flooded, any crops that had been planted are destroyed because of the amount of water. And you end up having to sit there and wait for all of that water to go before you can rebuild what you've lost.
Exactly. And as I just mentioned, I mean, even in the case of today, although again, much of these countries have since recovered, then, like I said, even today, those countries are still somewhat affected by the effects of Hurricane Mitch.
Yeah.
It really hit them pretty hard.
And it will continue like that because obviously the families that went through it, they've had to rebuild their lives as well as their homes, their farms, the infrastructure's needed to be rebuilt. And all it needs, you could be 2 years after getting everything back up and running again properly, the emotional effect that it's had on the people will always be there. And then all it will take is another hurricane to come along and they're right back to square one.
They just had a hurricane like about 2 years ago that went through Central America. Actually, I think there was one that almost hit that same exact area late last year, but I think it weakened before then. But I do recall a few years ago there was a hurricane that did affect Central America. It didn't necessarily take the exact same path that Mitch took, and it wasn't as destructive. But
yeah,
you know, I'm sure the memories for those who lived through it in 1998. It was probably quite a cause for great dread.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that lived in that region would sort of see the weather reports and see another hurricane coming, and they'd be like, you know, every time the word hurricane or tropical storm gets mentioned, you would get a lot of people start to worry, start to get scared.
Yeah, I mean,
I would probably even go as far as to say some people would have probably said, I'm not going through all that again. I'm getting out of the area.
Yeah, and like I said before, I mean, there were a number of people that did evacuate prior to Hurricane Mitch, but many others didn't take it seriously. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's their fault in the end, but at the same time, though, for those that managed to survive, they certainly have learned their lesson. And anytime something like that happens, because obviously it's quite obvious that most people would refuse to see a repeat of that. I mean, they might not be able to save their homes or buildings, but at the very least they can get out of the area while they still can.
Yeah, but you will also get those that will turn around and say, I've lived here all my life. I've never left ever before for any reason. I'm not going to do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
And they will rough it out. They will brave it and stick with it. And unfortunately, some of those are the people that are going to lose their lives.
Yeah, that's where
because they don't want to leave their homes.
Yeah.
And especially I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to if I was in that situation. You spend your life building a home, you know, and building your family. You know, your friends and family are in the area. Why would you want to leave them over a bit of weather?
Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden, excuse my French, the shit hits the fan, and you know they lose everything.
Exactly.
They've then got to start all over again, and that, you know, as Von said, that's heartbreaking.
It is.
You know,
it really is.
You can't. You know, words can't describe what they're going to go through if you know we haven't been through it ourselves. And I know Lois wants to do a show about the tsunami, the Indonesian tsunami.
She wanted to do something like that real soon, and she actually, funny enough, she wants me to make a presentation on that one. Oh my God! I mean, I'm already thinking to myself, if the Hurricane Mitch slideshow was very long, the one for the 2004 tsunami would be even longer than that.
Don't do a slideshow. Just get a few mobile phone pictures up and just go, there you go. And I was staying in Sri Lanka the year before the Indonesian earthquake. My cousin got married over there, so we all went over and we spent 2 weeks in Sri Lanka. And the following year, when the tsunami hit, I was in Corfu in Greece. And we'd spent up to Christmas Eve in Athens. And then we drove from Athens to Corfu to spend Christmas and Boxing Day over there. And we got Boxing Day. We were all sitting around the table. We just finished dinner. And my sister's other half said, I'm going to put the news on. And the first thing we saw was our hotel that we stayed at the year before. And we saw the tidal wave come in. And it literally just, from where the swimming pool was, there was a slight 3-foot incline. There was a mound that went up to sort of denote the boundary of the hotel. And then from the top of the mound down to the waterfront was about a 10-foot incline. Went down about 10 foot. And the tidal wave just came over the top of that like it wasn't there.
Jeez.
And it literally came in off the sea, straight over the top. It went right over the swimming pool. And you see the video footage. Someone was actually in the hotel videoing it as it was coming in. And it came right across the top of this mound, straight over the top of the swimming pool. The water didn't even move in the swimming pool. All this tidal surge had just come straight over the top like it wasn't there, like it was just a sheet of glass. And it went crazy. In the hotel, went straight through the reception in the foyer, straight out the other side. The driveway from the main road to the actual hotel entrance itself is half a mile long.
Really?
Swept straight along there, straight up to the main road, over the railway line, and straight into the countryside opposite.
Unbelievable.
Almost as if nothing was there. It just went straight over the top.
Just like wiped it clean in a way.
Yeah. And we were all in shock. And my cousin turned around and she said, I've got to get in contact with the hotel, because she'd made friends with people there.
Was she able to?
She was able to contact the travel company that she booked the wedding and the holiday through. And they'd said that, the hotel is fine. There's a lot of cleanup having to go on. But my cousin was more worried about the poor elephant that lived there.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
There was a 5-year-old elephant that the hotel owned. And a piece of land by the side was where the elephant lived. And one of the hotel members of staff would walk the elephant around the grounds. And for a small fee, you could actually sit on the top of the elephant and have a little walk around with it and have your photo taken. And I've got a photo of me on the back of this elephant. And no word of a lie, it's hilarious, because I look, in contrast, I look bigger than the elephant. And this elephant is 5 years old. And we were really worried about this elephant. And the hotel turned around and said, "It's okay. She's fine." I think she was called Nala.
Okay.
But she was fine. She managed to come through it okay. But it was, I think they said it was 2 years before the hotel managed to reopen.
Yeah.
Because of all the damage. And that whole area was affected quite badly.
Oh, yeah. It really affected a good portion of Southeast Asia. And I actually was just, funny enough, and I was actually thinking of Lois about this when I saw this, but I might have brought this show up. You ever seen that show? It's called I know I brought it up on a few shows. You ever seen that show called I Survived? You ever watched that before?
I've heard of it.
So, long story short, what I Survived is, it's a show. It doesn't run anymore. It ran between 2008 and 2015, and they interviewed survivors. There's usually about like 2 or 3 stories in each episode. Once in a while, they'll do like a one story, but most times it's usually. And the typical episode when they do the 3 stories is the first and third story are people who have survived, like in this case, who are victims from criminals, like people who are either beaten, were tortured, were raped, were almost murdered. So those managed to survive. They talk about that, and you get a few of those episodes where they also survive attacks from people that also became known serial killers. But in between the 2 stories, the second story, or if it's a 2-part story one, the second one is where they interview people who had survived something else, either a weather disaster, an animal attack, a work accident, And even though it still kind of falls into the criminal subject, terrorist attacks. Like they did like an hour and a half special on like 9/11, for example. So they did an episode where they interviewed a couple that managed to survive the 2004 tsunami. But where they were out in Thailand. And the story they talked was just it was unbelievable when you hear this. And I actually thought to myself, I gotta send this to Lois, because this is because nowadays they're uploading. You can watch a lot of these episodes now on YouTube. They're free, so you don't have to pay anything. But I'm concerned about sending that episode in particular for Lois to check out, because the way how these two people managed to survive was just that they should have been alive at all for this.
Yeah, I do remember there actually being a film about the tidal wave as well, the tsunami.
Yeah.
I can't remember the title of it, but it was about a family that were on holiday and they got separated.
That's what this couple was doing too. They were on holiday too in Thailand.
Yeah. They got separated after the tsunami, and it was all about the struggle of trying to find the missing relatives, and the heartbreak of finding out whether someone was alive or not. And very emotional film. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was quite a hit as far as I was aware.
You know what? I think my mom may have actually seen that film that you're talking about, because I don't think it was just a film. I think it might have been a mini series. So I think I might be thinking of something else, but I know it was involving the 2004 tsunami. And my mom watched it back, really, I think a couple of years after the event occurred. I hear
The Impossible. The Impossible.
Okay.
Maria and Henry and their 3 kids decide to spend Christmas in Thailand, but their luxurious holiday turns into a nightmare when a tsunami swells up unannounced, thereby separating the family.
Colette Mary just said she went to Sri Lanka in 2015. The local people told them about the devastation.
Yeah.
That's fresh on everybody's mind still.
The problem as well was that after before 2004, there was issues with civil war there with the Tamil Tigers. And I remember when we landed at Colombo Airport, I noticed that one of the military aircraft hangars at the airport had all these bullet holes and artillery round holes in the building. And I asked one of the stewardesses what was going on, what was going over there, and she said that was from when the Tamil Tigers attacked the airport. And I'm like, seriously? And she went, yeah. She said that was when they attacked. And I'm sitting there and I couldn't believe that they never bothered patching up the holes. They just left them.
That's just like
everybody could see what had been going on, and you're thinking, wow, this is amazing. But the country of Sri Lanka itself, beautiful country. And very colourful as well. You get areas where there'd be a different faith system or a different belief, and they would have a different coloured flag for each area, depending on what faith they were. You'd have an orange flag for Buddhists and a yellow flag for Islam, and different colour flags, and they'd be all over the place, all this different coloured bunting, and they were so proud of their heritage and their history.
Right.
And even after something like that had happened, they still carried on. They still did what they had to do, and the colours were still out there.
That's incredible. I was going to say, like, the fact that there were still bullet holes in this area. I mean, it's like that's very much similar to what we have over here for some of our Civil War buildings that are still like. Probably the best one I could think of for something like that is there's a fort down called Fort Pulaski. It was down in which is located in Cockspur Island, Georgia. That's near Savannah. And on parts of the fort, like on certain wall sections, there are still gigantic holes that are still there today, that were from the cannon fires. So there's still markings like that over here too, depending on the locations. And what's actually funny enough is Fort Pulaski, obviously, it's not surprisingly haunted by the dead rebel soldiers, but also I believe they actually filmed a part of that for the movie Glory back in the late 80s. Yeah, I think it was either that or a different fort, because there was a story about some of the actors that visited Fort Pulaski while the movie was in progress. So, okay, now Colette said, I love Sri Lanka. I stayed at Simon Bay Hotel. Beautiful. I heard it is a beautiful country.
We've got a building here called the Siege House in Colchester, and it dates back to the Civil War. And what they've done is where all the musket balls hit the building during the siege, they've put a red metal casing.
Oh, really?
Over the musket ball holes, so that anybody that walks past, you can see the amount. And there's about 150 of these musket ball holes in the woodwork of this building.
Oh, wow.
It's now a restaurant.
It's a restaurant, of course. Yeah.
And I have notes to do one of my ghost stories, one of my spookanories, based on the Civil War and the siege at that building. And I'm currently in talks with the management or the ownership to actually use the name in one of my books, because obviously I don't want to upset anybody by using their building in a book and making something out of it. But I'm waiting to hear back from them. But I've got a perfect idea regards to a ghost story based on the Civil War at that location. But then you move up to Colchester Castle and you go into the Civil War there. There's an area around the back of Colchester Castle where Charles Lucas, not George Lucas, because I keep saying Charles Lucas was one of the main people in the British Civil War, and he was caught along with his right-hand man, and he was executed round the back of Colchester Castle. Now, the area of grass where him and his colleague were shot and they fell, the grass stopped growing.
Really?
And every time they tried to replant turf there, the grass would die straight away. And so the spot they fell, no grass would grow. So eventually they put a footpath running around the castle and going up from the main path right across where the two guys had fallen. And they've now put there's now a monument on there to them too. But they don't actually announce the fact that that was where they fell, but they don't tell you that the grass stopped growing, so they put the monument on top of it.
What better way than to have it covered, than putting a monument on it?
It's bizarre because there's bits of history in Colchester I never knew about, like Colchester Castle when it was ransacked by Boadicea or Boudica, however you like to pronounce her name. When she burnt Colchester to the ground, including Colchester Castle, they reused the bricks, and you can still see them today. All the dark coloured bricks and the black bricks are the charred bricks from when Boudica burnt the place down.
Wow.
They reused the bricks to rebuild Colchester Castle afterwards. So
that's really fascinating that they did that.
Yeah. The Romans recycled everything. So after Boadicea had destroyed the place, the Romans went, fine, fair enough, we just rebuild it, and up it went. And they used all the burnt bricks and everything else, and you can still see them today.
Well, that's actually, I just thought of another location that has done something similar like that, and that's actually, and I've been to this area. It's a town called Alton, which is located down in southern Illinois, and it's often regarded as one of the most haunted small towns in America. And a lot of people often wonder, how on earth does a small town like this become so haunted? Well, there's a good reason for it. Is that there was the very first state prison that was ever built and opened in Illinois was down in Alton. And to make a long story short, in about 1865, so right at the end of the Civil War, later part of 1865, the prison actually closed, and a good majority of the building was torn down. All that there is today It's just like a fraction of it, like a corner almost, like with the way how I'm kind of like two walls standing. That's basically what I'm using my hands for, like to give you an idea of what it looks like. But some of the bricks and some of the bricks that were used, or excuse me, some of the cinder blocks that were used for the original prison would be used for other buildings. They were used for foundations. They were used for walls. And now that's not to say that's really the cause of every single haunting throughout the town of Alton, but a good majority of it would explain why it's such a haunted town, because it's the use of these limestone bricks that were used, which is not surprising.
Yeah, it's just how history is there. And even though whether it's haunted or not, you just look at it and you think, wow, you know, they went through all of that. And, you know, and you look at places like obviously what the Hondurans went through with Hurricane Mitch, the people of Sri Lanka and Thailand went through with the tsunami. And you just think how resilient humankind is to bounce back from such a disaster like that.
Yeah.
To actually go, you're not going to defeat me. I'm going to move on with this and just carry on like it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like with what I've talked about with this one, and also same with Galveston, where people at first people were like questioning, saying, do we rebuild or do we just leave the area? Yeah. And although I'm sure, and in both cases, it is true, a lot of people did leave. They moved to other countries to start new life elsewhere. But the vast majority of those that managed to survive, and even though they may have lost everything, and maybe a lot of people they knew, they still stayed anyway to continue to still live there. Because even though everything was, everything was completely destroyed, it was still home to them, regardless. So, I'm just going to read this, and then I think we'll probably end this. Do you remember the attack on Mombasa, Kenya?
Mombasa.
Mombasa. Okay, that's how you say Kenya. Went there not long after it happened. I was advised not to go, but I went anyway, and it was okay. I love Kenya many times. Cannot remember when it happened. Geez, Colette has really been she's really been going international.
I think that was in November 2002. It was a two-pronged terrorist attack, Kenya against an Israeli-owned hotel and a plane belonging to Akia Airlines. An all-terrain vehicle crashed through a barrier outside the Paradise Hotel and blew up, killing 13 people and injuring 18. And then they went on a bit of a rampage.
Surprisingly, I never heard of that one before.
So I think there was another one. There's been a lot going on in Kenya. I think there is like a religious divide going on because there was also raids in Kenya in 2014 where police raided mosques and took out quite a few people in there. But I think we're also partly to blame for previous terrorist attacks. So
unfortunately,
I mean, like Colette did, you know, she was advised not to go, but
she went anyway.
I went to Egypt, and we were advised not to do a day trip to Cairo because of things that were going on there. We still went. You know, we visited the pyramids. We went to a papyrus factory. We went into the city centre to the Hard Rock Cafe and had dinner there. And then we flew back. And we never had any problems. You know, we had the locals coming up and saying, you know, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? But because my parents had been to Egypt about 4 or 5 times, they'd already given us advice on what to do. Said, just take some pens and pencils with you. And if they ask you for stuff, just give them the pens and pencils. And they'll go away. She said, or failing that, just say Il Shakran. So we're like, right, okay, no problem. Well, we'd already been in we'd already been around the first pyramid. We'd just come out of the main pyramid, and we were standing on this viewing platform that overlooked all 3 in line. And we had this young Egyptian lad came up to us, and he must have been about 14, I reckon. And we were with this Irish couple, and we were standing there. We'd been taking photos, and this little lad came up, and he walked up to this Irish guy and said, "Smoke cigarette?" And the bloke went, "No." And he's gone, "Yeah, please, cigarette. And he just turned around and he went, "Sorry, mate, I don't smoke." But he had a cigarette in his hand. So he was smoking a cigarette at the same time as he's telling this to this guy.
I think he must have been looking for a smoking buddy or something.
I'm giggling because I've got my cigarettes in my pocket, but I'm not smoking. So I'm all right. I just say I don't smoke and I can get away with it. But this guy had actually got a cigarette in his hand and turned around to this boy and said, "Sorry, mate, I don't smoke." And I'm like, do you really think he doesn't understand what you're saying? This lad's been around tourists. He would have learned the language quite quickly, because that's what he's doing. He's going in and he's asking tourists for things. So when he came up to me, I said, "Sorry, mate, I don't smoke, but have some of these." And I handed him 4 pens. And he went, "Thank you, English, thank you, English." And he walked off. Right, case closed. That's it. Right, let's
there you go. Yeah. You know, it's
So-
funny since you brought up Cairo. Funny enough, we actually have a Cairo here in Illinois, but it's nowhere near where I live though. It's literally like at the southernmost part of the state. It's the southernmost city, and they actually named it after Egypt. So because what most people don't know, and I probably have said this before on some of the other shows, but I'll say it again, but the crescent of Illinois is actually referred to as Little Egypt, and which actually would explain a lot, because there's a lot of strange things that go on down in southern Illinois. I mean, obviously, I talked about it in some of my slideshows. There is a lot of paranormal activity. It is said to be a very active haunted area. But I guess part of the other reason why they call it that is, anyone obviously who reads the Bible attentively knows very well that Egypt does not get good press. It's a region of darkness and superstition and oppression. And that's kind of the same the case with Southern Illinois. So that's why they refer to it as Little Egypt.
Yeah. The name sort of stuck with it.
Yeah, it did.
The rumors
Cairo
about Egypt have stuck with this one, so the name's sort of carried over.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's
I was just gonna go ahead.
It's just strange, isn't it? How that you can name, say, like over there in the States, you name something after somewhere else, and it's got that sort of same air of mystery to it.
It does. Well, and also too, if that's not enough, because it's the southernmost city, or town in Illinois, it's also in a spot where it's pretty much surrounded by water, because it is basically the one spot where both the Mississippi and Ohio rivers meet before flowing out to the Mississippi River. So it's the only part of the state where the Ohio Mississippi rivers actually are connected. So I've never been down there, but I don't know. I heard it's kind of a rough area down there too. At the same time.
Do I really want to go there? But that's what we were told about Cairo.
Yeah, it's very much like in this case with Cairo here.
We were told, be careful. There'll be people there with camels that will try and get you to go on a camel ride, and they'll ride you off into the desert and mug you. And I'm like, right, okay. And my ex-wife, not being the brightest candle going, managed to get herself accosted by one of these guys with a camel, and he tried to get her to sit on the camel. And she was like, she didn't like camels. And she was going, "Oh, I want to get off. And this bloke's going, "Oh, you'll go for a ride into the desert." And I'm like, "No, I ain't having this." And in the end, I was told that the tourist police will be around. And I kept saying to him, "Let her off the camel, let her off the camel." Well, by this time, the camel was up on all fours. And I shouted out to him, I just turned around and said, "If you don't let her off that camel now, I'm going to stick that camel up your ass." And the bloke looked at me, and he was a bit shocked, but the tourist police had heard me shout. and they came over on their camels, gave the bloke a smack around the head, with a stick, and he got the camel down on its knees, and she got off.
Wow.
But they
What are
would
the
have done
odds
nothing.
for that?
If I hadn't have shouted, they wouldn't have done nothing, and he'd have ridden off in the desert with her. In hindsight, I wish he had done, but
yeah, that would have been bad.
You know, but yeah, crazy world we live in.
I just want to say one other thing, because I've been meaning to say this. This is the last thing I can really say, by the way, about Hurricane Mitch that I forgot to mention earlier. I got to say, it's also amazing how long it lasted from the time it started to the time it ended, that it actually even basically went up to your area briefly.
Yeah.
Passing throughout the UK and Ireland and going up to the Faroe Islands and Denmark. I mean, it's just...
The thing is as well, I noticed on the second week, I was looking at the maps, and you could see the progression that it was making as it was coming up toward Honduras. And I could see on the west coast of the States, you could see that the clouds and the wind was coming in from the west.
Yep.
And I kept saying to myself, you watch, that's gonna turn, and that's gonna head up towards Florida.
And it did.
And out towards the Atlantic. And then, of course, you said though on the screenshots there, it literally did a U-turn. It came in and then turned and went off up. And I'm like,
yep,
see it coming. Could see it coming.
I just find it amazing the huge amount, like huge path it took. It almost was like this storm system wanted to live long enough to hit, as many parts of land as it could, do its damage and effects, and then it was gone.
So it gone off into the Atlantic and it goes, that's it, I've had enough, not doing no more. That's it. Bye. See you later.
Yeah, but no, it's like I said, that was quite a slideshow though. But I'm seriously glad to be done with it. It'll be a very long time before I do that one again.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we can't do Nikola Tesla tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But
we will be back with Nikola Tesla, which is a good thing, because I need to research a few more things about him, because there are, I think with the Nikola Tesla one, it may be more than one episode, because there is a lot going on, not just with Nikola Tesla's life, but after his death. There are a lot of things and a lot of mysteries going on about Tesla, and we need to look into those a little bit more, so that we've got more of an episode or episodes to give to you guys. So we'll return with Nikola Tesla another day.
Well, at least I was able to buy you some time for this matter.
Yeah, don't give me the time to do the research.
Yeah.
I mean, I already know quite a lot about Tesla's life and the inventions that he come up with, and the Tesla coil and things like that, but also the struggles that he had in his life. But would be the second part, which is the bit that needs more research, because of the things that are going on even to this day that need to be looked into a little bit more, because there's things happening today that he needs credit for, but he doesn't get.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I need to add to it so that we've got a part 2.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I think we should definitely end it then. So, because obviously in less than 2 hours, I got to be back on here for Supernatural Talk, which we have someone who actually, I think he's watched a few of our shows on this too. It's his name's Howie Hall, although he goes by the name of Ed, and I know he usually watches a lot of our shows. So it'll be nice to also be meeting another one of our viewers for the first time, and it's really been a long time since we've had any viewers actually on as a guest. So it'll be great to finally meet Howie for the first time. So it should be interesting.
And I've had a long day, so I've got to have a bath and go to bed.
Yeah, well, and for me, I also definitely need a drink of water after all that talking.
Well, I was up at 6:30 this morning. I had to take my son down to London for another appointment with his hip. And so it's been a very long, tiring day. So it's
yeah. Well, and also not to mention, I got to finish up because last few days it's just been nothing but packing up all my Christmas decorations, and I'm almost finally done with that. So as soon when I get off after this, first getting some water, and then finally packing everything else up, and then I'm done, and I can relax for a little while before I have to do the next show.
Yeah, we got all our Christmas decorations out of the way. They've gone. They're back up in the attic.
I kept them up, believe it or not, until January 8th because obviously, I mean, I went to church with my mom, and the Advent, the official 12 Christmas season actually went till January 8th. So I left everything up and plus it was a lot of work putting it together. So the idea was to keep it up as much as possible. But once midnight hit on January 9th, that's when everything came down. But by the time I had everything down, though, because I was almost up all hours of the night that night. So by the time that I finally had taken everything down, it was already close to 5 o'clock in the morning. I had to get up in 2 hours to go to work. So I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to finish taking down the stuff, leave it on the pool table, and I'll pack it up when I get back home. And I thought, at least everything's down now.
That's the worst bit, though. I find that putting everything up is a lot quicker than taking it all down.
It actually is. It's for some reason I've noticed it. I always thought it would. I thought it would take longer to put it up, but no, you're actually right. It feels more quicker when you're putting it up than taking it down.
Yeah.
But it's even worse though. However, because again, I go through different holidays. So, for example, in this case with Valentine's Day coming up in a few weeks, I'll be putting the Valentine's Day decorations up, and those will be up for the entire month. But here's the problem, though. As long as it's probably going to take a while for me to take all my Valentine's Day decorations, but then right afterwards, I take it all down and pack it up. Then I got to take the St. Patrick's Day stuff out. And so on. Same when I have to put the St. Patrick's Day stuff away and then put the Easter stuff up.
You see, now you've done that. We got an old Christmas tree, and we put a trellis up around our front door, and we cut off the branches off the Christmas tree, and we tied them to the trellis around the door. So it looks like there's like a conifer surround around the door. And then what we do is, like for Christmas, we've put lights on it, and we put the Christmas baubles on and things like that. So it looks pretty. Then after Christmas, we take them down, and then normally we leave the conifer trellis up until Halloween, and then we put Halloween baubles on now and make it look spooky. But now you've said that about Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day, you've given me ideas of putting love heart baubles around it. Then for St. Patrick's Day, 4-leaf clovers around the door. Easter, little Easter eggs and different things like that. You've given me ideas now, Nick. Stop it. Stop it.
Oh, trust me, I've been doing this for the last couple of years, so it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, but people keep giving me all these ideas, and I end up not writing anything. I'm behind. It's a good job I haven't got a publisher breathing down my neck saying, "You're a bit late with this book."
You know what? I've kind of been dealing with that myself for the audiobook series that I'm still trying to put together. I'm still waiting for those last 7 or 8 participants to send me their stories. So I'm gonna have to. I guess if no one's breathing down my neck, I guess that means I'm gonna have to be the one doing that.
You'll be the one doing the breathing.
Yeah, I know I will.
You know what I mean? It's a case of you want to release it, but you're not under any pressure to release it. But you've got it all sitting there ready to go. And when you've got the odd couple of stories that you still want to get into release, it's sitting there, and it niggles at you, doesn't it? It sits there nipping, and it's going, you want to release it. You want to release it. But
well,
you can't,
I have
because
actually
you've got so many missing.
Well, you know what I have done, at least to try to buy some of the time, is that because I actually listened to some of my previous audiobooks, just ones that I've done by myself. And I might have said some of this before, but I realized that some of my previous audiobooks, and these were like my first ever audiobooks that I made, there were a lot of hidden mistakes that I needed to correct. Like at that time when I was doing them, some of the stories that I was reading, I was reading literally way too fast. So what I had, and knowing for the fact that there was absolutely no way I was going to re-record some of these stories because they were long stories. I just decided I would take like a part of the sound clip and then like get right to a point where I end a sentence and then just split it and just separate it that way. And although there were some parts I did have to re-record anyway because of mispronunciations, that kind of stuff, and I've successfully fixed one audiobook, though I still need to add the sound effects and music. But now I'm doing that for another book and this is actually my very first audio that I've done. So I've been doing that while I've been still waiting on these remaining audiobooks for this project.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still not easy, but at least it gives me something to do.
Well, if you're wanting to get this audiobook out and people are still slacking behind, my deep husky voice is ready for you.
Yeah. There you go. So all right.
Yeah. Anyway,
we definitely got to end this because we've been on for over 2 hours now.
I think this is the longest show we've done, isn't it?
No, I remember we did a show that went over 2 hours, I think. I don't think this is the first. Gonna have to go back and look.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, we're gonna get off here. Next week for sure is Nikola Tesla. We'll be talking about now that the slideshow is finally over. So until then, I'll see. Thank you guys all so much for playing along. I'll see some of you guys back here in just less than 2 hours for Supernatural talk. But if you'd rather wait for the next episode to the Grave and Back, we will see you guys next week. So you guys all have a great night.
Thank you, everybody, for viewing. Bye.
Take care.